Back on the Boulevard Thursday, May 16th. As always, here to prove to you there is no such thing as football season. We are presented by the Believe Network tonight. By this time last year, the credits had already run on the XFL 2023 season. The Arlington Renegades were champs, and Rod Woodson was on the hot seat. But now, friends, it's only week 8 of the UFL 2024 season as the spring schedule turns into a summer playoff push, although 3 of our 4 games this weekend in the air conditioning. So round up the family, go buy some cheap tickets at the UFL.com, and head out to a game. We promise you it's better than baseball. Say hello to the producer, director, and owner of Studio Z, Chris Zook. Zook, every week you tell me to let you know when the lines drop.
Yeah.
Which, that's one of my favorite parts of the week. Well, here we are. It was about 48 hours until kickoff, so just a few hours ago here on the East Coast, and we still had no lines. I was in shambles. We never did an episode of Springball Boulevard without best bets. I'm thinking, what are we going to do here? So I said, you know what? Power to the people, Zook. I sent the tweet out. I waved the magic wand.
I can't even listen to
Kazam, we had lines, baby.
I can't even listen to this. And you say it's only week 8. This season is flying by.
Yeah, but, last year we wrapped up already. So here we are in mid-May, late June. Mid-May, early June. As you can tell, I was in a bit of a tizzy trying to get my best bets finished. I only had about an hour to figure out what I was giving you guys.
Yeah, and you know what?
That's why you prepare.
We jumped on them, and we got a package again.
Yeah, we already kind of knew where we were going. We just wanted to, the sports books to give us something to work with, and they did. So thank you to them. On tonight's show, could Mike Nolan's Michigan Panthers become this year's Cinderella spring football story, much like Arlington last year? We know that the odds makers had the Panthers at 13-1 odds coming into the season to win a UFL championship. Now they're locked into the playoffs, and they possess a secret weapon that some of you might not know about yet, but I promise you will down the stretch here. On the XFL side, it's win and in for the Battlehawks, but standing in the way, a DC Defenders club with absolutely nothing left to lose except another 3 yards up the middle to Cam Harris. What to expect in the rivalry rematch from DC and St. Louis. We'll also catch up with XFL champion Sal Cannella, who was nice enough to join us on the Boulevard this week. His Renegades gear up for the sequel with San Antonio. And as always, we're going to close things out with some winning plays to help you cash in Week 8. We're on YouTube, Twitter, X, and Facebook tonight. Drop us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit us with a retweet if you're with us on X. Let's take a quick glance, Zook, at our UFL Week 8 standings. If you're with us on podcast, Birmingham 7-0, looking to extend that streak to 15 straight on Saturday night at home. Michigan is locked into that 2 seed at 5-2. Interesting note, in Week 10, the UFL has moved the start time of the Birmingham-Michigan game to 2 p.m. It was originally set for noon Eastern. Memphis is 1-6 with a lone win over the Houston Roughnecks, who sit in the basement of the USFL Conference at 1-6. In the XFL side, things get a little more interesting. St. Louis is 5-2 with wins over each of the teams in the conference. San Antonio is 5-2, which has surprised some people, but that's their record. DC sits at 3-4, still with an outside shot at the playoffs. And the Arlington Renegades looking to play spoiler down the stretch. Boy, wouldn't it be something if they finish 4-6 at the same record that they did last year to win the championship? But this time, like we said, that conference just too tough to make the playoffs at 4-6 this year. Let's start off with our USFL Conference doubleheader, this one going down on Saturday evening. We lead things off with 2 teams who are really headed in entirely different directions. It's the second meeting between the Showboats and the Renegades. We have the Panthers as an 8-point home favorite in Ford Field. Over-under sitting at 47.5 for this one. It's actually our highest of the weekend. And the last result was a 35-18 Michigan win on a rainy day in the Liberty Bowl back in Week 5, I believe. Forecast for this one looking like more Bates bombs inside of Ford Field. The Panthers fans will be looking forward to the last home game there for that one. let's start look with the Michigan offense against the Memphis defense. And the question is, who's going to be pulling the trigger for the Panthers this weekend? Could it be Danny Etling? He took over as a starter in Week 5 during the first meeting with Memphis, but he got hurt in Week 6. So Brian Lewerke then took over last week in Week 7. He leads Michigan straight down the field against DC. They score right away on drive 1. In fact, it was a Lewerke scramble that got them a 7-0 lead over DC right off the bat. Or is it going to be Bryce Perkins? This is a name UFL fans need to know, and we foreshadowed this a little bit a few weeks ago on the show. I ranted and raved about Perkins. I'm a huge college football fan. I loved what he did at UVA. I thought he turned that program around and led that program back for some really tough years to good seasons for their standard. He was a second-team All-ACC kid right behind Trevor Lawrence when he was in college, and his numbers were just ridiculous at the highest level of college football in the 2 seasons he started as a Who. So, Bryce Perkins, highest quarterback rating of the entire UFL season last week. So, is it Etling? Is it Lewerke? Is it Perkins? I honestly can't answer that question right now. We haven't seen a depth chart yet. So, at press time, I can't answer that for you. What I will say is maybe the job is Etling's if he's healthy, because we asked Mike Nolan in the postgame against DC about the quarterback situation going forward, and he mentioned he didn't know that Etling was actually hurt until he got home and Etling was in practice and was struggling. So that might be interesting, because it seems like Nolan was forced to go Lewerke and Perkins without too much of a plan because he was so invested with Danny Etling. So that's going to be interesting. I don't think there's a reason to rush Etling back here. This is the worst defense in America with the showboats that you're going against. And when you're looking at a guy like Bryce Perkins, I mean, I thought he played a damn good game against DC. 11 for 13, 116 yards passing, had a couple carries, I think 6.5 yards per carry on the ground. He looked comfortable in the offense. And this is a guy who was signed just a few short weeks ago, coming in and picking up that Marcel Belfay offense. So he can run. He has a cannon for an arm. And I think regardless of who the quarterback ends up being in this situation, I do give the edge to the Michigan offense. And it's wild to think, because remember, Michigan started this thing with E.J. Perry at quarterback, and the first couple weeks of the season, that was kind of widely viewed as maybe a little bit of a weakness. They would kind of jam Etling into certain situations. He struggled early on. You know, Perry couldn't really throw the ball too well. He was running for touchdowns, and his rushing game was a big reason they ended up beating the Battlehawks in week 1. But now you get down to QB 3 and 4, and I have to give it to Steve Kaiser, the GM here in Michigan, to go get a guy like Bryce Perkins mid-season here. That might make the difference. You talk about XFL 2023, how the Renegades traded for Luis Perez, and that ignited their title run. That could be Bryce Perkins this season for Michigan if they decide to roll with him. And listen, we say the same thing every single week about the Memphis Showboats. It went from ugly to full-on car crash ugly last week for the Showboats. They gave up 47 points and 400 yards to Arlington. An 0-6 team. Just inexplicable. So when you're Marcel Belfay, what do? Well, you've chosen so far not to air it out all that much. In fact, fun stat here, Zook. Here's the definition of balance. Michigan, 180 pass attempts, 180 rush attempts. That is insane. Right down the middle. That is balance. But they are dead last in pass attempts, pass yards, and pass touchdowns. So it'll be interesting to see, but I give a pretty solid edge here to that Michigan offense. Let's take a quick look at the Memphis offense against the Michigan D. Obvious edge here to the Panthers, right? I thought they really ate the defenders' offensive line alive in week 7, and they even had a few starters out on defense in doing so. So if you're worried about Michigan, maybe too much of a favorite, maybe resting some starters with the playoffs locked up. I wouldn't. I mean, technically, they still have home field to play for. And obviously, in the UFL, your best players are going to want to get on the field so they can get more film and have a shot at NFL training camp in July. So I wouldn't be worried about any kind of angle of Michigan resting guys. They've shown their defensive depth so far, and I think they can continue to do so. Some notes for Memphis. Troy Williams started last week but left with an injury. He's been limited in practice. In fact, I did take a little glance at the game notes for this week, and it looks like Case Cookus might be getting the go, but we're not going to confirm that yet. It's not really that big of a piece of information either way. I think Cookus and Troy Williams have been so similar in running this offense that it doesn't make or break the bet. But Troy Williams did get hurt and has been limited. Case Cookus is not on the injury report. So what else do we know? Memphis. I mean, I think last week against Arlington was probably their last opportunity to try to run the ball. Because when we came into the season, I talked about the Showboats and Darius Victor of being just a workhorse back, and it just hasn't panned out that way. And when you really think about it and how inept the Memphis run game has been, you see they get down 2-3 scores in the first half early. They can't run the ball because they're going to be chasing points constantly. So that's kind of what I've learned about Memphis. You know, everyone wants to point the blame at the O-line and Darius Victor. The defense isn't helping, and they're constantly having to throw the ball. I don't expect them to be able to run it here against Michigan either. In the last meeting, Panthers held them to 41 yards on the ground and 9 carries for 17 yards for Victor. Michigan is a little banged up on the defensive side of the ball. Kai Nakua, the free safety, has a concussion and has not been practicing. Noah Dawkins, who filled in pretty nicely for Frank Gindat, linebacker, not practicing either with a foot injury. I don't think any of that will matter because Memphis is also ravaged with injuries. They have a UFL record 12 guys on the report this week. 53 points in the first meeting between these two. I'm not sure we're quite getting back to that high of a number in the total. I think you have some uncertainty of maybe who's playing quarterback for Michigan. And plus, I expect Breland Speaks and that entire Michigan front seven to tee off on this Memphis O-line. They beat them for 7 sacks last time. I don't know, something in the neighborhood of 25-14 Michigan. Maybe you get a couple Bates field goals up that to 31-14, but that would actually be an accomplishment for the Memphis D. They've given up 37 points average in the last 5 games. So the Panthers are the pick for me here, Zook. I think they get their 4th straight win, and it's time to start talking about them being underrated as a championship contender. Your pick and thoughts on the early game.
Yeah, I'm staying away from anything Memphis. They're a poor team. Michigan is clearly the pick. I think that defense is too strong, and on the other side of it, the defense is horrible. I said the same thing pre-show when we met. I was in the 30 to 15 range, but it easily could be the 25, 15, somewhere in there. Money line wise, I just don't see Michigan losing.
Yeah. Before we get out of this one, I wanted to talk to you about the kind of narrative that seems to be forming around Michigan that they're very underrated, right? They come into the season 13-1 to win a UFL championship. Believe that was 7 out of 8 odds wise on the board. They beat DC by 13 points as a pick on the money line. They seem to be a solid team against the spread. So is 8.5, does that feel like a steal to you, or does that feel like now the odds makers have kind of caught up to Michigan and have them just right?
I think it's right. I don't want to say too much, but
yeah,
I think it's right, and they're catching on. Yeah. I'm actually surprised it's not higher.
I was hoping to get this inside a touchdown because Michigan has been very underrated, but I'm not able to get that, so I'm not going to lay it. But stay tuned to see if Zook will lay it.
Well, I will say we're really discussing the possibility of not having the lines out, right? So I started thinking, all right, well, if I was an odds maker, what would I put this game at? and I had Michigan at 10.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and I think like I said, they are a bit underrated at this point in the season. And if you're looking at some title futures, just watch out. Michigan might be a little feisty against Birmingham in that USFL championship game. Let's go on to our primetime portion of the doubleheader. Oh, man. How funny would it be if the Birmingham streak survived that game of the year against St. Louis, but then got snapped by Houston? I mean, wouldn't that make for some television? I'll tune in just for that 0.1% chance that it might happen. It's the Roughnecks at the Stallions. Birmingham, just a enormous favorite here. 16 points, the highest I can remember at any spring football league. Over under is 43, which is hilarious. You think odds makers saying 16 for Birmingham, but over under 43. That shows you the kind of respect they have for Houston's offense. First meeting was a 32-9 pounding in week 5. Forecast for Protective Stadium looking like 70 and some scattered thunderstorms. Always going to have that in the deep south this time of year. 60% chance of rain. Let's focus on the Birmingham offense, who I don't expect to sit any starters on a scale, like across the board, all 22. I know they've already clinched a playoff berth, but this streak is priority. This is an opportunity for them to do 15 straight wins in front of the home crowd in prime time. That matters to Skip Holtz and that bunch. It would be a very special night if they could get to 15 straight and just keep building from there. Just kind of doing some quick math, I don't think they will have the chance to get to 20 because I think they only have 3 or 4 games after this. But 15 would be the number this season. I'm sort of done trying to project when Matt Corral might get his opportunity to start. We've tried to do it earlier in the season, and TPG and I took a pretty big swing and a miss on that. So I'm going to wait for the depth charts to come out. If it was up to me, which it never will be, Matt Corral would start this game. Adrian Martinez, nothing left to prove, even on film. At this point, I think he's a lock to get an invite to NFL training camp and probably make a roster. Definitely practice squad, if not the 53-man. After his last few starts, the last thing you need is for Adrian Martinez to get hurt while you're chasing a third straight championship. This is a very hard-hitting Houston defense with some guys who pose a problem for Adrian in the open field, and you do not want to see him go down. He had to use his legs pretty often in the first meeting back in week 5, as you're seeing here. If you're with us on YouTube on the highlights, and really regardless who the trigger man is for Birmingham, I do expect a bit of a hangover offensively. Now, don't jump down my throat. I know I've been getting all this flack from the Stallions fans all season, and it's probably well-deserved. When I say that, I don't mean they're going to go 0 for 7 in the red zone. I don't mean Martinez is going to throw a bunch of interceptions or, they're going to score 14 points. I just mean a little bit of a step back from their standard, as teams do tend to have a little bit of a hangover in spots like this. And it really seems like all the top teams in the UFL have had a hangover against Houston. You think about St. Louis, struggled a bit offensively against them. We just saw San Antonio have to rally from behind. So Houston likes to ugly it up. They're just that team that you come out kind of sleeping against, and they give you a little bit more of an effort on defense. I don't know. They probably won't even hold Birmingham to under 25, but even by their standard, that would be less than average. Roughnecks, third against the run, and their tops overall at 3.2 yards per carry allowed. So they do match up pretty well against the running backs here. I don't think you can do anything to stop the quarterback running. But against Marable in person, I do have a little more faith in the Houston defense than I would against, say, a Memphis or an Arlington. I was impressed at how the Roughnecks suffocated John Lovett. That was a great performance from them. He has been the top rusher in the league. They held him to just 37 yards on the ground and 2 yards per carry. So Chris Wilson has some things going right on that side of the ball. People forget that even if it is Matt Corral, he can burn as well. I know we're ranting and raving about that 3rd and 16 scramble and against St. Louis that Martinez had that really saved the game. My UFL play of the year so far, one of the most impressive plays we've seen. But Matt Corral did something very similar against the DC Defenders in the rain on a 3rd and 11 to ice that game. So if it's Corral, I still expect a bit of a run threat. I think Reuben Foster is a guy who is critical to this Houston defense, and he has not been practicing this week, so that could be trouble. Although Chris Odom has been an absolute force, leading the UFL in tackles for loss and forced fumbles. He's going to be a lock when it comes to all UFL selections. But I do give an edge to the Birmingham offense, obviously. Let's look at the Houston offense against the Stallions D. This is why it's going to be an automatic underbet for me. That's really becoming any Roughnecks game, no matter who they play. I don't care. Houston is 6-1 to the under on the season. Last week against San Antonio, 39.5, and it still cashes easily, without a doubt. Even if you had overtime in that game, you were hitting the under. Here's the Roughnecks scoring output the last 4 games. 9, 9, 8, 12. What are we doing? I mean, it's a disaster. For some perspective, they haven't scored 100 points this season. Arlington just put up half 100 in one game last weekend. Houston, 13.7 points per game, 9 touchdowns through 7 games. I don't know what they were trying to attempt with Jarek Arantano last week, but he was clearly hurt the entire game. And this type of season and this type of situation is not worth re-injuring your wrist as a quarterback. That's not been healed. They had some drives where they moved the ball, and I was actually a little impressed with Garantano and what he was able to do, but they can't get in the end zone. They settled for 4 field goals against San Antonio, and they blew the game again because they didn't have enough points to stave off a comeback. The offensive line is terrible. They're the most penalized unit in the UFL, just an automatic false start every drive. They give up 6 sacks last week, and they can't spring the tailbacks with TJ Pledger and Mark Thompson. They don't give them any room. Thompson had 38 yards rushing last week. 36 of those came on one play. So really my point is, if you had those kind of problems offensively against San Antonio, it's not going to get any easier this week against Birmingham. At this point, I would probably just go back to Reed Sinnett. I mean, it seems to be the easy choice, right? This is not worth getting Garantano re-injured. The Roughnecks do have some decent playmakers at receiver. Justin Hall's a guy who I think will have a shot in the NFL. He plays his heart out even through the incompetence of this play calling that just hasn't worked. So really, I mean, Birmingham's defense should have a field day. They were able to get a ton of different guys on the field back in week 5 when this thing was way out of hand in the second half, and they still held Houston, I think, 0 points in the second half. I expect much of the same here. Great news for Stallions fans. Looks like they're going to get 2 starters back that were actually hurt against St. Louis, and was a lot of the reason why I thought the Battlehawks would have success offensively. DeMarcus Gates and Lorenzo Burns, 2 leaders on that side of the ball, both expected to be back. It's just insane how this team has found a way to win. Stallions are the pick here for me, Zook. I think they're going to win their 15th straight. They go to 8-0. I would enjoy seeing Matt Corral get a full game from wire to wire here, but I think whether it is Martinez or Corral, or, you know, you could even put Jamar Smith in there for all I care. I don't care who the quarterback is. I love the under in this situation. Who do you got?
This is pretty easy. I'll put it on screen right away. You know, I got the ponies. I mean, yeah, we don't have it yet. We don't have it for this episode, but
yeah.
That's pretty good. Do that again.
No, because it'll get clipped. It's probably already going to get clipped. I don't know why I did that. Yeah, big mistake.
Moving along. Jeez. Minus 1,800 money line. That's the only thing I have to say.
Hey,
you spent 5 minutes talking about this game. The only thing I see, minus 1,800 money line.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Why not?
Move along.
Lock it in. Like I said, wouldn't that be something, though, if this is where the streak ends?
Could you? I mean,
DC's ended against Orlando last season. I mean,
if you're
this is at home, but
if you like that crazy bet, that's the one. take $5 on minus 1800.
Yeah, I just think it's absurd.
Or no, well, I guess it's a plus 1,000 if you take the other side.
Oh
right?
yeah, 10-1.
Yeah, but 10-1. Put $5 on it. Screw it.
Don't encourage TPG because he will. I think it's hilarious. A 16-point spread at a 43 over/under. That is fun. Like if you have a 16-point spread in most other levels, like college football, it's a high over/under because
right.
you know.
Yeah, you should be in the 55 mark or something.
Right.
Like, come on.
Yeah, but the Houston offense is just a disaster. So that is how that's been going for them this season. If you're with us on YouTube tonight, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for joining us. We're coming off an episode last week where we had the Boulevard After Dark. We went from Sunday into Monday. Now we're on at a much easier time for most of you to be here. So we appreciate you joining us. When you do tune in, it gives us the opportunity to talk to UFL athletes like Sal Cannella. Let's go ahead and hear from the Arlington tight end this week. From the windy city of Chicago to the Arizona desert and the plains of Auburn, Alabama, now a tight end for the Arlington Renegades. Welcome to Springball Boulevard, Sal Cannella. Sal, thanks for joining us today, man.
I appreciate you having me.
So I got to ask right off the bat, since you're a guy who played both football and basketball, did you catch Austin Rivers' recent comments about being able to take 30 players out of the NBA that would immediately start in the NFL, but it not working the other way around with NFL players being able to play professional basketball? I wanted to know maybe your thoughts on some of this.
There's so much skill and so many hours that have to get put into each respective sport. I think it'd be extremely hard for anyone to just make that smooth of transition without definitely struggling at first. I mean, I think if somebody that was this is an interesting thing though, because if you're a football player that's never played basketball, then no, you can't just make that transition. You know, you got to really, it's only the guys that had a basketball background. And then vice versa. If the basketball players never played football, they're probably not going to be able to handle it. So I don't know. That's a funny one because I don't know, man. The basketball players, you know, we're always going to have the physicality side of things. So,
all right, now let's talk about the UFL here. You hear football coaches really at every level always talk about focus on your process and your preparation, and the results will take care of themselves. So when you're in practice or a game and you know this offense is good, right? You guys are moving the ball, you're limiting turnovers, you're hitting explosives in the pass game, and you're putting up points. So the process is there. How hard is it to be patient for that result?
it is hard. I mean, that's kind of like anything in life that, you know, nothing comes easy, and it's a consistent day-to-day prep and week-to-week, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute. You got to keep doing it, win or lose. You know, it doesn't matter. The result might not be there right now, but you may be preparing for something in the future. And you kind of got to have that blind faith and know that what you're doing, you're preparing to be in the best position possible. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about, is preparing and doing everything in your power to be put in the best position possible. So when your time comes or those moments happen, you know, you're prepared and you're ready.
All right, let's move on to the task at hand this week. San Antonio. Last time you guys played in week 5, you threw for 250 yards on the Brahmas D, which is the most they've given up this entire season, but couldn't come out with the win. So what is the focus this week in film, and are there any challenges that defense might present you, specifically in the linebacking core?
They got some good players, definitely. You know, they tackle well. You know, they play together. But, you know, we like our guys, and we like the things that we can do in the pass game and the run game, and we like certain, you know, matchups, and, you know, being able to move a lot of guys around in this offense and put them in a place to succeed. You know, I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to us just playing our game, executing our assignments, and, you know, each and everybody individually doing their part. And, you know, hopefully at the end of the day, it all comes together.
And in that week 5 matchup against San Antonio, you guys faced some pretty serious adversity with your teammate, offensive lineman Drew Samia, going down with about 8 minutes to go. in the third quarter. Game stopped for a long time while they tended to him. Eventually, we're able to cart Drew off after a long delay, and watching at home, really scary. Seemed like a severe injury. I can only imagine you being there on the field. What was it like to get Drew back in the lineup this last week? And overall, how do you think things like that can affect the game?
I mean, first of all, blessings that he's all right and he's back at it and doing everything he's been doing. It's awesome seeing him back out there and whatnot. When something like that happens in a game, I mean, your first thought is, man, you're hoping that the guy's okay. You're praying for your guy that you go to battle with, and you're just praying that he's gonna be all right. But then, when it is a long break like that, main thing is to just keep staying warm because guys cannot move around, get cold. And, sometimes it can throw off the momentum, it could be in either of the team's favor, We were driving the ball down the field and we were in the red zone. I wouldn't say that's what made us not able to score on that drive or get a touchdown out of that drive. But at the end of the day, man, that's football. That happens, more often than anyone would hope for. But it's kind of one of those things you just got to lock back in and know there's still a bunch more football left. And then to bounce back to the second part of the question, yeah, no, it's huge to have him back. That's a guy that has, a lot of dog in him, a lot of experience. I mean, he's a quarter of the O-line. And, man, just having him in there, that's just another beast that we can run behind.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about how spring football might differ from the NFL and college when it comes to teams that are eliminated from the postseason. So in college, if you're not eligible for a bowl or if you're out of the playoffs in the NFL, we get some low effort stuff. It seems like teams will maybe wave the white flag a little bit, but it doesn't seem that way in spring football. What wakes the Arlington Renegades up in the morning knowing there might not be a championship left to play for, but you guys still have a season to finish strong?
As a competitor, everyone wants to win, right? If you're not trying to win, I mean, you shouldn't be here. And it's easy to wake up every day and work for a goal and a dream of going back and playing in the NFL and making a team. You want to go out here. Everyone's here for a reason. Some guys are on the tail end of their career. Some guys are trying to make it back. Some guys are trying to prove they can go there. So if you keep that mentality of, why you're here and what you're working for, I mean, you should have no problem waking up every day and have an extreme amount of motivation. And winning is winning. We may not be able to go into the playoffs, but being able to finish the season strong and beat, two of the top teams in this whole league, in my opinion, that sets us up great for next year, the team next year. And, for me, it's easy. A lot of guys I know we have on this team, they're like-minded, and we're all pros here, and we got a good head on our shoulders, and no one's gonna throw the towel in because if you're that type of guy, you probably wouldn't be on this team in the first place. So.
And last question here before we let you go, Sal. As a guy who played in the Spring League, the USFL, the XFL, and now the UFL, is the narrative true that this version is the most highly competitive version and provides the best talent in really spring football history? What are your thoughts on how that kind of ranks versus other leagues?
I think every year I've played in the Spring League, going from the Spring League the first year in 2020, doing it again in 2021, USFL, XFL. I think each year I went into another league. It's gotten better and better and better. And then this year is just a combination of it all. I mean, when you cut 8 teams and the talent pool gets sliced in half, I mean, dude, there's only so many, spots available. So, this competition is great. And I think that helps all of us because it puts us all in a spot where, NFL teams and scouts and whoever else is watching can, really say wow, this is, respectable film and respectable competition. And we don't have to put in too many other X factors of, well, you know, he was playing against older guys, or, oh, this was a younger group of guys, or these guys didn't have experience. I think you got, you know, enough talent in this league to, you know, be respected as a player.
All right, that is Sal Cannella. They will take on San Antonio this weekend. Appreciate you joining us tonight, Sal.
Yeah, man, thank you.
Great chat with Sal there, one of the cornerstones of spring football. Had it rolling with that Arlington offense last week. He found the end zone 2 times, and he's a great guy, even though he crushed my dreams in the XFL championship last year. Seam route right down the middle. It'll replay in my nightmares forever to get the Renegades on the board, and the onslaught was on from there. But still a great guy, very humble, and just been a key piece of Arlington, who looks to go forward here and maybe surprise some people as we have that game preview coming up towards the end of the show. We did get the USFL doubleheader out of the way, so now we get on to Sunday's XFL conference slate. In this first one, for one side, it's win and clinch a playoff spot. For the other side, it's win and hope San Antonio self-destructs and just maybe you get a third crack at St. Louis. That is what you have to hope for as a DC fan right now. It's the Defenders at the Battlehawks. St. Louis, a 7.5-point home favorite. Total here sitting at 44.5. And the forecast for the Lou looks like 8 a.m. beers in those St. Louis tailgate lots. And once again, I'm sure you'll be happy to hear this, the Cardinals play across the street at the same time. Boo. What are we doing? Well, Zook, let's take a look at this one. At the same time, when I was thinking about looking back on the UFL season, especially coming into this St. Louis-Birmingham game last week, I just figured the Battlehawks would have this season-defining epic win in the game of the year and then come back hungover for an 11 a.m. kick against DC as a huge favorite with playoffs already locked up, and just that would give DC enough of a chance. But what is that? What's that old saying by Lee Corso? Not so fast, my friend. And that's how I feel right now. It turns out Anthony Becht is not coming off a win, so he'll have his guys hungrier than ever to get back in the win column, ready to take on DC, who's in a tailspin right now. Looking at the Battlehawks offense against the DC defense, the spotlight this week shines on A.J. McCarron, who suffered an ankle injury after a dirty hit by Carlos Davis, who dove at his legs in the second half of that game in Week 7. Coach Beck saying A.J. is still day-to-day. However, he did not practice today, which was a downgrade from Wednesday's practice where he was listed as limited. Beck did say if McCarron can't go, it would be all hands on deck, implying that we could see both Manny Wilkins and Brandon Silvers piloting this offense. So keep an eye on that situation before you go throw your savings account on St. Louis this week, because otherwise it looks like a sure bet. But I don't know about this situation. I know at this point in the season, AJ's very banged up. He's one of the few quarterbacks, along with, who else? Jordan Ta'amu and I guess Luis Perez, as the only guys that start every single game so far at quarterback. He leads the league in dropbacks, and AJ's been sacked 15 times. So it's been a tough toll on his body. You have to figure he's playing through some serious pain. But all that aside, I think the focus for the St. Louis offense this week is going to be the run game. DC hasn't been able to stop anybody on the ground lately. They gave up 187 on the ground to Michigan. They gave up 200 to San Antonio. So this spot setting up nicely for Jacob Sailors, who put up a hat trick against Birmingham. It became a very nice little red zone option there through the air and on the ground. The only chance I think that DC potentially stands in this game from a defensive standpoint is if they can get St. Louis to 3rd and long. And if you're listening to this, AJ, go ahead and take a week off. You do have some time to prepare for the playoffs and the championship. And, you don't have to play every week, dude. It's, kick back, watch this one from home. It's, you don't gotta worry about playing this week. We do normally love to watch you, but this week is a week of rest for you. Maybe an early Father's Day for AJ McCarron. How about that? Yeah, because that's really going to be DC's only chance on defense, right? McCarron has been very complimentary of Greg Williams. We talked to him in an interview a couple weeks ago, and he said that DC was the best defense he had faced up to that point. Again, that was not. That was before the Birmingham game, so thoughts might have changed a little bit. But it speaks to what kind of respect that Bruce Gradkowski and AJ have for Greg Williams and kind of the weird coverages down in the red zone they can throw at you and some of the bluffs and weird things that they've done against St. Louis before. The problem is now the Battlehawks have gotten very used to that. Flipping to the DC offense against the St. Louis D here, this is what lost the game for my defenders in the first meeting. They couldn't muster 100 passing yards. Jordan threw 3 picks. Run game, per usual, non-existent, 2.8 yards a carry. And I was convinced that they had fixed all those issues against San Antonio, and boy, was I wrong. They had run the ball for over 100 yards against the Brahmas. They were putting together fourth-quarter drives, clutch plays when they needed it most, but I was wrong. They went right back to crap, and they're stuck in neutral again now. They were terrible against Michigan. And to make matters worse, Kelvin Harmon tears his hamstring, out for the year. That is a gut punch to an offense that's already struggling. Worst possible guy you could have get hurt at this point outside of Jordan was Kelvin Harmon. This isn't a Birmingham, St. Louis, or San Antonio type of roster where you have guys 3, 4, 5 deep at receiver, different options for your quarterback to throw to. This is not a deep wide receiver room. Kelvin Harmon had 47 targets up to this point in the season. Next highest, Chris Rowland at 23. Double the targets for Kelvin Harmon than the second most guy. So you're not going to find a target share like that anywhere else in the UFL, I promise you. And now you got to face the best pass defense in the league with the Battlehawks. I mean, they give up less than 150 yards passing a game, and they might be getting 2 or 3 starters back that missed the Birmingham game. So I don't know, Fred Keiss, what you do. You can't pass. You can't run. You got the lowest completion percentage in the league. You're barely scoring 17 a game. You're 15% on point after attempts. I mean, the list goes on here, folks. And I could sit here, and I will, and beat the shield all day. And I'll do what I do every single week. Sit here in this chair. I'll tell you, DC's going to beat St. Louis. And they can win games ugly without winning a box score. And I could tell you, DC's undefeated in the Dome. We own this building, right? This is ours. I could tell you we're not going to spot St. Louis 17 points in the first quarter like we did in the last meeting off of picks and block punts and other nonsense. Maybe Greg Williams finds a way to wake the pass rush up. Believe it or not, this pass rush that we raved about in the offseason, dead last in the league in sacks. Nowhere to be found. So I got nothing on paper to back this up other than AJ's injury status potentially playing a huge factor. I already promised this fan base that DC could not possibly look worse than they did against St. Louis. Then Michigan happened, watching that game, felt like they didn't get off the bus. So what gives here, right? 7.5 points is too much still. Even after me complaining and being negative about DC, here's your positive. Because you've been this bad, now you're a 7.5 point underdog. You should not be. That's too many points. AJ is 50-50. I'm picking DC straight up here, obviously, Zook, because I have to, not because I want to. But I do want to take the 7.5, and I do like the under here. I think we get like a 23-18 game. What do you think?
I think this is my favorite segment of the year. Just sitting here listening to you trash your own team on how bad they are. And then, like a homer, still pick them, money line. I'll take St. Louis.
Now, what would be worse for me?
I'll take
Trashing my own team or picking St. Louis?
I mean,
what do you think could be the worst situation for me tonight? Right, I got to go with them straight up. I wouldn't bet on them, but I wouldn't take the money line, but I do think 7.5. What are your thoughts on Is that too big of a spread, or are you confident with St. Louis?
It depends on AJ.
Right.
It really does. I mean,
it sucks when that's the answer, right?
Right.
Like one player breaks open a game that much, but when you don't have
you got
a backup that is played, I mean, Manny Wilkins saw the field for like one snap, which ironically enough scored.
that offense is
DC.
anemic without losing their best wide receiver on top of it too. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, Harmon out. Yeah.
Harmon, it's just you're having a bad season and things just keep getting worse. It's like quicksand, right?
You know what? I'm not letting Zook pile on. I'm telling you this: the Battlehawks won't score 45. That's the only guarantee I'm willing to give you. They're not dropping 45 or more, right? I can comfortably say that.
We'll see.
Yeah. Let's round out the weekend. This is what the UFL is now referring to as the Battle of I-35. And speaking of I-35, Zook and I were actually on the Texas interstates last year on our way to the XFL championship game in the Alamo City. And being from Pennsylvania, where the speed limit on the interstate is 55, because if you go any faster, you might hit a pothole and get ejected from your vehicle. It was nice to see 85 is the speed limit on I-35 on those Texas highways. It made me want to move there. Think about it. No speeding tickets, no income tax. You could go to Buc-ee's every day for lunch. I mean, I just might, Zook might have to find a new host. I might just move to Texas next year. In this one, it's the Renegades and the Brahmas. San Antonio, the 3.5-point home favorite. Total sitting at 46 in this one. Brahmas won the first meeting 25-15. Forecast does not apply. It is our third out of 4 games this weekend indoors. So let's take a look at the Renegades offense. I know we caught up with Sal Cannella, so I want to start with them. They seem to be such an anomaly, and really on every level of football that you might look at. You don't often see a team that's top 2 in total offense, passing offense, third down offense, completion percentage, turnover margin, really all of it. I mean, some of those, they even lead the league in those categories, but still go 1-6. You just never see that. And you could say, oh, the numbers are now overinflated because they had Memphis last week. But listen, everyone has played Memphis this year, except, funny enough, DC. Can't wait till that. We can shoot up to number 1 on the stat board in every category once we get to drop 100 points on Memphis. I mean, Birmingham got to play them twice. Maybe that's why their stats are so inflated. But it is important to mention, something came out today. Holt Nailers, the quarterback 3 for Arlington, has his own podcast that has had some pretty interesting takes on it this season. And I saw a clip where he said that he might play down the stretch, and the coaching staff has kind of taken a different stance now that they're out of the playoffs. And he specifically was targeting Week 10 against DC, telling ECU fans where he went to college to come out to that game and see some of the Pirates on this roster. So, yeah, I'm interested in that to see if other teams will maybe do the same thing with some of their backups. I don't think it's going to happen this week, but don't be surprised to see Holt Nailers and maybe some Lindsey Scott Jr. as well in this offense. I don't expect Bob Stoops to rest anybody here, though, against San Antonio. There's some bad blood in this rivalry. It dates all the way back to last year with them going up against Wade Phillips and A.J. Smith and some of the comments that were made earlier this year. We mentioned to Sal, Arlington threw for the most yards that anybody has on San Antonio's defense all season. I think that's important. Defensively for the Brahmas, we have yet to see an injury report from this game, so it's really just been really hard to try to handicap this whole slate with lines coming out late and missing injury reports and trying to scramble for information. But hopefully we get some depth charts tonight. I do give slight edge to the Renegades offense here, even though the San Antonio D is getting healthier. I love Javonte Payton. I think this is a home run NFL guy if you can get him on a roster. I mean, Luis Perez completed 85% of his passes last week, and Peyton just has so much to do with that. Even in week 1, when they played against the Stallions, he was 10 yards behind the defense on a go route, and Perez just couldn't get it to him. He underthrew him, and Mark Gilbert ended up picking that one off. But I would love to just isolate film on Javonte Payton and just watch this guy burn. He did it last year. He was a huge part of the XFL championship run. he did it at Tennessee when he was in college. I just like Javonte Payton is just a solid receiver, and I think he can make for a good addition to at least an NFL practice squad. And then you see guys like Sal Cannella, who was quiet early in the year. Now he's getting going. Deontay Burnett, a good piece in this offense going up against his old staff from Houston. Tyler Vaughn's, right? Really deep receiving core. And you add Davion Smith, who has been a no-show the entire season, goes off against Memphis, now has his wheels under him, has some confidence to establish that run game. By no means do I think the Arlington offense is going to have the success against San Antonio that they had against Memphis, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far out of this unit in Chuck Long. Flipping sides of the ball here, it feels like we have quarterback questions really everywhere across the UFL this week. And I figured A.J. Smith would be at the top of that list as he would be faced with a lot of questions on his quarterback, right? Kevin Hogan came in for that fourth quarter comeback against Houston. But we've heard some comments now from Wade Phillips and media. They kind of doubled down on Quentin Dormady and said Dormady is comfortable with the offense and knows what he's doing out there, and we're comfortable with him as our starting quarterback. So, you know, that's interesting to me because he tossed 3 picks against the Arlington defense in Week 5. He has struggled mightily in his last 3 games. 127 pass yards per game in those 3, completing just 56% of his attempts and 5 picks. So I don't know how confident I would be in Dormady here, but the good news for Brahmas fans and for this offense, you're now back inside at home. Each of those last 3 starts that we just referenced for Dormady were away from home, outside in some terrible weather conditions that they had to deal with. And I don't want to chalk it all up to that, but I think that it will help to get back on that Alamo Dome turf where they're a lot faster. In the last meeting against these two was the John Lovett show. I assume it could very well turn into that again, although I expect Arlington's defense to be more prepared for Lovett the second time around, where if it becomes a one-dimensional game where the Brahmas can only run the ball, I don't think that's what's going to beat Arlington like it did last time. The Brahmas have had a few games now, even back to Week 2, where they haven't scored until the fourth quarter. They cannot afford to do that this week if they're looking to make the playoffs. They have got to score early on. Got to get Jontre Kirkland and Speedy Stevenson and Justin Smith back going. You think back to Week 4 when they played against Michigan and Kirkland and Smith both had 100-yard games. They have not been able to replicate that at all since then. So, you know, the Renegades can get to 22, 24 points here. So San Antonio is going to have to score. You don't want to have to rely on Cody Latimer to bail you out constantly in these situations, right? Clutch Cody, always coming up with a play, that 3-point conversion, that touchdown at the end of the game, always coming up with the huge plays as a veteran. You don't want to have to rely on him bailing you out every single game. It's been a rough go for this air raid lately, and is this sort of the same drop-off from A.J. Smith that we saw last year in XFL 2023 with the Houston Roughnecks, where they came out high-flying? Yeah, I think they got to 5-0, 6-0. They were dominating through the air, and then everything just fell apart. Brandon Silvers looked disastrous in down the stretch last year. So I see a lot of parallels. You know, you had Cole McDonald coming in this offense last year. Now you have Kevin Hogan with Quentin Dormady, kind of like you hear the footsteps as a starting quarterback. And I don't know. I do have faith that the Brahmas can probably get back on track. They did have a positive. Last week they hit 6 pass plays of over 15 yards, so they got some of the explosives back, but they just kept turning it over in the red zone. So you think some of that fumble luck will maybe start to go their way. Edge of the Brahmas offense here, I think they bounce back from those road struggles. And the pick for me is going to be San Antonio, which pains me because in this situation I think San Antonio goes to 6-2, but DC would still win at 4-4, giving them an outside shot. Brahmas coming up after this, Birmingham and St. Louis. Interesting schedule. Who you got here, Zook?
This one was tough.
Oh, I know who you're picking now just based on you saying that. Because it wouldn't be hard for you to pick the Brahmas.
No, it wouldn't be.
Not The Renegades.
I'm taking the Renegades. I am. And the reason why is momentum.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. They had a great game. They got a ton of confidence.
Yeah.
On your end, you need
I know.
the Fades to win.
Oh, trust me, I wanted to pick them bad, but
because you're not beating St. Louis. We already talked about that. So, like, you need the Renegades to win just to even have a chance, so you don't have to actually win out. You know what I mean?
yeah, and this is a 3.5 point spread. Zook comfortable money line. Is this your upset?
I think it's an upset.
Okay. Yeah.
This, God, they
It's
got
tough.
me again. They got me again.
Right.
But this team has so much potential, and they showed what they had. And I get it. They played a bad defense last week, and they put up, what'd you say?
It was still more than anybody else scored on them.
What'd they put,
47
47?
to 400 yards.
Yeah, 47? I mean, that's what I'm expecting the whole year out of them. They just never got there.
Are you worried a little bit about Ehlers and his comments about playing down the stretch? Does that signify to you that maybe Arlington's shutting it down?
I think it's the same thing. Listen to that Cannella interview, right? What's he saying? It doesn't matter who you put on the field. They have winners in their camp. They got competitors in their camp, and that's it. Yeah. If you're not that kind of guy, you're not on the squad.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe you'll see other guys hit the field, but I'm not sure if it really matters.
Yeah, you certainly won't see that for San Antonio, who is clinging to their playoff lives right now. I mean, this season for them could be 3-4 just as easily as 5-2. You think about the Memphis game and the Houston game, both coming down to just insane finishes. But it gives you confidence in the Brahmas that if you are at the wire, they can win a game for you. There is nobody better than the Brahmas in the last 2 minutes of the game when everything's on the line. And I think a lot of that has to do with Wade Phillips and his calming presence. When you look over there and you see Wade Phillips, he's not the coach screaming up and down, going nuts about, everybody get order, all these other coaches get animated and stuff. You look over, Wade Phillips just knows, we're going to win this game. Everybody chill out. Don't play like it's 2 minutes left. Play like you play the rest of the game. And let's go win this thing. And then he goes crazy when they do win. He loses his absolute mind, so you love to see it. That is San Antonio and Arlington, our final game of the weekend. We will not be on the road for the Battle of the Brands tour here in Week 8 because there are no crossover matchups to see. A full slate of just USFL versus USFL and then XFL versus XFL on Sunday. So we'll be back with the Battle of the Brands tour in Week 9. I hope you guys have been enjoying that content throughout the season. Stay tuned for that on my Twitter at MattyFreshTV. All right, we talked about getting the lines a little bit late, so, we kind of had an idea of where we were going with best bets. We probably gave some of them away already. Here are our official best bets for Week 8. We're going to start things off with an automatic under, Birmingham, Houston, 43. Last time around, got this at 42.5. I think there was 32 points in the first half, and I end up covering. Crazy, so, why am I going back to this? Am I absolutely insane? No. If Houston scores more than 8 points, something crazy must have happened, like a block punt or some stupid big play. And now that I said that, that's probably what will happen. But, yeah, I'm going under. I think 6-1 for Houston is enough for me on the under to just keep riding that. We're going DC plus 7.5. If this was 6.5, 5.5, if the line does move, basically anything inside a touchdown, watch for the AJ news. I think even if AJ plays, I'm okay with 7.5, getting it outside of a full touchdown. And I'm also going to take the under in DC and St. Louis just based on the possibility that this could be Manny Wilkins or Brandon Silvers. And DC without Kelvin Harmon, one of their huge playmakers, how do they adjust to that? As well as some key pieces for the St. Louis defense coming back. Austin Fiolu, a guy who I thought, was amazing for the Sea Dragons last year. Hasn't played much this year. Finally, not on the injury report. He's 330 pounds in the middle to stuff that already non-existent run game. Those are my 3 plays. Zook, trying to get above 500 this week. I think you can do it, man. Let's go 2-0.
Don't say that.
Oh, I got faith in you, man. This is the week you turn it around.
All right, so I've officially moved the line myself from -8 to 8.5. I'm just saying.
Hey, we're the ones who asked for the lines. We got them, and then we moved them. Sorry.
I'm just saying. So
would you be comfortable at 8.5 for our viewers that might want to take it now?
Well, I already said I was comfortable at 10.
Okay.
So I think this is a home run play. I put 2 units on it.
Ooh, yeah. Let's go. We're doubling down.
I didn't tell you that at the beginning of the show, but yeah, this is a 2-unit play. I love it. And I don't care who starts at quarterback. I just don't.
Yeah. Didn't matter last week.
And
shouldn't matter again.
I'm staying same game, which is weird. With -8, you don't normally want to take an under.
Yeah.
But I just don't think Memphis can score.
Yeah, I kind of was in that same situation with DC Houston. Remember, we were calculating what I needed, and you might have to do that again. But yeah, I mean, the only really thing you're worried about is the Memphis defense. Can they hold them to under 40? Right?
Yeah. And again, we said we're looking at 30-15 game, 25-15, somewhere in that range. I really like both of these plays. I didn't have to think too much about them. Just off of what I know, what I've been watching, we're going 7-6.
So we have action on every game this week besides San Antonio, Arlington, and I think a big reason for that is because in my camp, I can't bet Arlington. I just won't do it. I don't have the guts to do it, even though I saw that line steaming up last week. It went from 3 to 7 by kickoff, and I'm thinking, man, this is free money, and that's why it's going up so much, and it ended up being. But I can't do it because I will ruin it for Arlington. If I jump on them and back them, it will be a disaster. I won't do it. I think
and you need them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also I haven't seen an injury report yet. As of press time, so I'm kind of worried about, you don't want to get blindsided by something.
There's a reason why the Renegades logo isn't on this graphic. It's because we've already said we're done. Yeah. We're not betting anything that they're involved in because you just don't know.
I might take one of their totals down the stretch, but
I won't even. I'm not even doing that.
I've sworn.
Not a chance. I'm done. I'm out. I'm out.
Maybe we're the problem with Arlington.
Is that what it is? Yeah. It's me.
That is week 8 best bets. Of course, we got to take a look at DFS and our guy, the People's Gambler, who hit a home run with Ty Scott last week. Can he keep it up in UFL week 8?
Stardom, Bryce Perkins. Signed to the Panthers 3 weeks ago, Perkins finally made his UFL debut against the Defenders and was highly efficient, completing 11 passes on 13 attempts for 116 yards. If last week told us anything, it is to buy stock in the quarterback who is playing Memphis that week, and Michigan is a team that nobody wants to see down the stretch. With a dynamic athlete under center, Perkins will provide stability to a run-heavy offense through the passing game, and I expect him to find the end zone multiple times against an abysmal Memphis defense. Start Bryce Perkins. Sit him, Dawood Davis. Davis has been the lone bright spot for the Showboats this year, accumulating 357 yards and 3 touchdowns. But coming off a 47-23 beatdown and questions looming around who will start at quarterback, things do not get any easier for the Showboats this week as they travel to Ford Field and match up against one of the league's top defenses. Davis had a massive game against Michigan a couple weeks ago, and the Panthers secondary will look to key in on him and limit his explosive plays and yards after the catch. Sit Dawood Davis. Sleeper, Stephen Mitchell. Mitchell was signed back to the Battlehawks 3 weeks ago and has been targeted 13 times since his return. Mitchell had an outstanding performance against Houston and even found the end zone, but struggled significantly last week at Birmingham as he was responsible for 2 drop passes. Heading back to the Battle Dome this weekend, Mitchell will look to redeem himself from a week ago by capitalizing on his targets and finding the end zone for the second time this season. Sleeper, Stephen Mitchell.
I love the Perkins play from TPG. I cannot believe he's $8,600 salary. Expected him a little bit lower. I think that is a good start. Speaking of some quarterback news, before we get off the air, Zook, I did just get the Birmingham and Houston depth chart as I glance over to you and completely get thrown off of what I was about to say. Thank you, Zook, as always, for being a massive distraction to my
Team
thought
TPG,
process.
I'm on it.
What?
Let's
Who cares
go.
about the depth chart?
Tail that guy. Tail him.
Well, it might be important for your DFS lineup. What I have here, the Houston-Birmingham depth chart just dropped. Adrian Martinez is QB1 for Birmingham in Week 8. Matt Corral still sitting. Wild. And for Houston, Jarrett Garantano moves to third quarterback. Reed Sinnett back in the starting lineup. Seeing if there's anything else notable. Reuben Foster, the top linebacker for Houston, is out. Their top corner for Houston is also out in Keandre Thomas. On the Birmingham side, it looks like Mark Gilbert and Carlos Davis are two key pieces on defense that might be missing. But Martinez, any thoughts as we go off the air, Zook? Here we go again. This is the guy. Corral is done, right? Now we can definitely say it. Unless there's an injury, Adrian Martinez is the starting quarterback the rest of the way.
I don't know. I think he's going to get some
We're
rest.
still doing this. I'm so sick of doing this.
I don't know. I'd love, you know what? Skip Holtz, if you're watching, we want to talk to you. That's what I'm going to say. Because I don't.
Jamar Smith at this point.
What the hell are we supposed to do? You don't know.
Well,
We want you on the show. We want to pick your brain.
yeah.
You don't have to give up too much, but
Yeah, Coach Skip is always a great interview in these post games, and we've asked him about this many times, but it does seem like they settled on a starter. I know everyone's been like, oh, what are you talking about? This has been since week 6 we've settled on a starter. Okay, you're right. Adrian Martinez is the guy. I will not tolerate the Matt Corral slander that he's trash. I still think he has some in him, and he would probably start just about everywhere else. Sinnett starting for Houston. Okay, we'll see. See if I can lock into this under. For the producer, director, and owner of Studio Z, Chris Zook, who was making a cameo as the People's Gambler yet again this week, I am Matty Fresh. Join us for a recap episode on Sunday night. And as always, there is no such thing as football season.